Good evening, welcome everybody to our August Chippewa Valley Chapter WAHI Continuing Education Meeting. We can probably go around and introduce ourselves so our speaker knows who he's speaking to. I'm Mark Stagg, Homestead Professional Inspections in Whitehall.
I'm Matt with A to Z Inspections.
Jared Suko with Wisconsin Building Inspectors, Eau Claire.
James Davis, Ideal Inspection Services, Chippewa Falls.
Home Inspections Eau Claire.
Terry Elliott, Chippewa Valley Home Inspections, Fall Creek.
Dave Welch, Top Down Home Inspections in Chippewa.
Corey Schulze, Home Inspections, Coleman.
John Evans, New Age Inspection, Eau Claire.
Professor, Home Inspections, Racely.
I don't have any announcements of anything. I don't know if anyone else has anything. I know there was a board meeting last Monday night. Dave, I don't know if you wanna do a quick update on that?
Yeah, a quick update, I guess. There's been a lot of talk going back and forth about the inspection agreement. Somebody brought up some changes that should maybe be made, all because of one person that had called in and was concerned about how the hoops that he'd have to go through to get a copy of the report, right? So they ran it through the attorney that they have, and the attorney has determined that the wording is just fine the way it is. If you really want to change, go ahead, but doesn't recommend it. The realtor training, they're gonna continue going with that. It's been working pretty well. They're making some pretty good money on that. The next one's gonna be in Fond du Lac. They haven't had any talk about having one around it here, to be honest with you. That doesn't bother me a bit, but I don't, well, they're going ahead with it. That was the end vote, so they've been doing a lot of it in Milwaukee and Fond du Lac. And then, maybe the most important thing was who's responsible for any damages that happen in the house. If a buyer is the one that damages it, buyer's dad, something like that. We've talked about who should be responsible and who is responsible. And, we're affiliate members of the Realtors Association, so therefore we kind of need to follow their code of ethics and such, but the consensus really is whoever unlocks the door, whoever made the appointment, whoever unlocks the door is responsible. So in Milwaukee, Dave Mason never has to make an appointment. Somebody else does it. The realtor comes there and she opens the door, or he or she opens the door, and they sit there and they keep their mouth shut. And then they leave and lock things up. As long as they don't talk, there's no liability against them.
Yes.
Yeah,
The realtors.
they are required to be.
There's
Required.
a lot of areas in the state, Pete, where realtors have to let you in,
Yep.
which makes no sense to me.
It does
How do
not
they
make
get anything
any
done
sense.
if it's in the inspection zone?
Yeah, there's no uniformity across the state at all
Wow.
when it comes to that.
So just
It's
know
crazy.
if one of your customers breaks something, there's gonna be probably a fight over who pays for it. Hopefully the customer says, I'm gonna take care of that, but we know how people are. And then they're gonna start going after you because you're the one with the insurance and you were the one that gave them access to the house.
So, line 189 in the offer to purchase. Buyer agrees to promptly restore the property to its original condition after the buyer's inspections and testings are completed.
Okay.
It's in the offer to purchase. They are responsible, and if they break something, they are responsible for their own behavior.
But whoever made the appointment,
That's not what the offer to purchase says.
No,
This is a
but-
contract.
but believe me,
We're not in a
Well,
contract.
if it's a
I
realtor.
know what you're saying, Jim, and you can run it that way all you want.
Yep.
Right, I mean, nobody's saying you can't,
I'm not
I'm just
saying
saying
like-
be careful. And maybe have the discussion if you think that you're with people that could likely cause a problem, right? You got a ton of kids, or dad wants to throw something open and break it, just maybe give them a heads up that I'm not gonna be responsible for this, you are.
I'm not saying like, if somebody's acting like a fool, you shouldn't say something. But I'm saying the buyer goes and breaks something, if the realtor looks to you as the inspector to pay for that thing, no, that is the buyer's responsible for their own behavior.
I understand. But, right, and if they don't pay it, and
Then
take it
take
to
it to
court,
court.
I'm pretty sure you get hauled into that court
Right.
along with them. Because at that point, now they're gonna try and go after everyone, they're gonna try and get as much money as they can. They're gonna go after the realtor, they're gonna go after you, they're gonna go after everyone, right?
Who
Yeah.
does the garage door by putting a 2x4 block underneath
You break the brush.
Got to crushes, who's paying for
Who's
it?
responsible?
Well, that would be you being responsible for your own behavior.
Right.
But we are supposed to test those.
Yeah, but reasonable resistance. If you can't hold it up.
No.
But you're going by the standard of practice. That doesn't intercede the approval. You make the appointment, just like a realtor makes the appointment. It's everything. That's how it's shown.
That's the
We make an
consensus.
appointment and we're there, we are responsible.
That's kind of the consensus, so, but
100%. That's
just
when
just
you
know
talk
that.
about this kind of stuff, right?
No.
So if we make the appointment, we are responsible for anything that goes on. 100%.
You're not their parent.
Doesn't matter.
Sure.
Doesn't matter. You made the appointment, you're approved to be there, you are responsible for anything that happens.
So that's all that happened in the last board meeting.
Absolutely.
I mean, we could have the discussion more, but I don't think it's, I don't think it's, we need to.
I don't think we need to.
If somebody makes a damn thing, you just have to pay for it, no doubt, but it might get ugly.
The only other thing is, if something like that happens and the seller gets upset because something of theirs was damaged or broken, they can file an ethics violation with DSPS. Even though your report can be 100% perfect,
Yep.
you still have a complaint in your file, an ethics violation complaint to the DSPS. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind too, so. All right, our speaker tonight is Wayne Bjorkman. He's an investigator with the West Central Drug Task Force. He's gonna be educating us on drug trends and what to look for and how to protect ourselves. And whenever you're ready, Wayne, it is all yours. Thank you.
Thanks for having me here tonight. If anybody has any questions that come up or anything I talk about, feel free to just shout it out. And then at the end, we can open it up to more questions and stuff too. Been doing this for a long time, so should be able to at least answer most of what, anything that you guys come up with. So I'm a detective with the Eau Claire Police Department. I've been in law enforcement for about 14 years, and I've been in my role as a detective since 2018. Previous to this, I worked patrol, and I was also a member of the Eau Claire Police Department SWAT team. My job as an investigator with the Drug Task Force is to focus on conducting investigations into mid to high level drug traffickers in the area. They usually start in this area, but as we'll get into, every drug that I'm going to talk about comes to us from different places, and we can talk about that. A little bit about the Drug Task Force. I guess go back to me a little bit. So, law enforcement for about 14 years. Prior to getting into law enforcement, was in the military for a while. Got out of the military. Wasn't real sure what I wanted to get into quite yet. Ended up rodeoing professionally for a little while, and then I was guiding elk hunts out west in Montana and Colorado when met my wife and decided it was time to get a real job. And this is as close as I was to get to a real job. So here I am. The Drug Task Force was formed in 1988. If anybody's familiar with Sheriff Ron Kramer, he was one of the founding members of it. Was a big supporter of us all the way up to his death. He took care of us real well, and he kind of built it to where it is today. It's now the oldest running continuous drug task force in the state. We are made up of investigators from several different law enforcement agencies that are within our task force area. But our coverage area, primary coverage area, where we are the task force, 6 counties: it's Dunn County, Chippewa County, Eau Claire County, Clark County, Buffalo County, and Pierce County. We work those counties, but like I said, all of the drugs come from somewhere else. So we work directly with DCI and DEA. I've worked many cases that have taken me all over the country. Last summer I worked a very large-scale cocaine trafficking case where we ended up putting a case on the source of supply that was directly receiving it from Colombia, the Colombian drug cartel, being shipped into the U.S. via Mexico. So I flew down to Fort Worth, Texas, and ran that case with DEA last summer down in Fort Worth. It was interesting sitting, when we finally got a hold of him, he talked for many hours with us, and sitting across the table from a guy he was a multi-millionaire drug dealer. It's all he'd ever done, sell drugs, been to federal prison once for it already, and he was telling us about his product, and he had, at any given time, he had millions of dollars worth of product out on the street that he was just waiting to get paid on. So, whole different world. I've worked a lot of other cases that have kind of taken me places. Summer of 2021, I spent almost the entire summer working over in the Twin Cities. I worked directly with DEA on that. I spent so much time out of our area that one night I was sitting in the back seat of the truck on speakerphone with the special agent in charge of the entire Midwest region of DEA out of Chicago, being sworn in as a temporary case-specific DEA task force officer, which gave me authority to go armed undercover anywhere in the world, essentially, as long as I was working that case. We had worked that one. We were working on who at that time was the largest supplier of meth to the Twin Cities. So he was bringing in up to like about 200 pounds per week into the Twin Cities. And then through him, we were able to work that into a Mexican drug cartel. And our plan, the reason I had to get sworn in like that was me and my DEA partner had set up a undercover deal for ourselves where we were gonna start to receive 200 pounds of meth directly from the Mexican drug cartel right on the border. And we were gonna have to fly armed on a civilian airline undercover to San Diego, where we were gonna link up with DEA and get that deal done. We ended up finding another way to run that case without kind of some of that danger. It also took a little bit longer because the Mexican government had created a law that said that the United States can't send undercover agents into Mexico without identifying them to the Mexican government. And we'll get into a little bit about Mexico. There's a lot of reasons why we would never do that. So they took about 2 weeks to come up with aliases for us. And in that time, we were able to identify the trusted couriers that this cartel network was using to truck drugs all over the United States. So we started just taking them off all over the country. We were pinging their phones and ripping them in random spots all over the country. It worked out really well. So we were able to kind of take that whole network down without actually having to leave the Twin Cities. I talked about our goal is to conduct investigations into the highest level of drug dealers in this area. We do sometimes buy from low-level people. I've bought everywhere from tiny, like a thimble amount of fentanyl from somebody on a street corner, all the way up to posing as like a multi-pound level meth buyer. We work all the cases, but every case that we work, we're trying to work it up as high as we can possibly go to the source of supply. Slides are goofy. It's got the words jumbled up, but we can go through it, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't know.
So methamphetamine, kind of see it. All the pictures and most of the pictures in here are from cases that I've worked. This is a bunch of meth. This is 5 pounds of meth that I seized in Eau Claire one day a couple of years ago. Meth is the largest problem as far as drugs are concerned in this area. Fentanyl and heroin obviously cause the most like deaths and things like that, but as far as just widespread crime and just drug usage in the area, meth is king. Meth comes here from predominantly the Twin Cities to this area. We don't really see it coming from like Milwaukee or Chicago. In fact, we've worked cases on gangs that were sending their people from Chicago all the way to St. Paul to pick up meth just to bring it back to Chicago again. So the Twin Cities, unfortunately, in the past couple of years has become a major hub, specifically for methamphetamine for the Mexican drug cartel. They have set up shop in St. Paul, Minneapolis, and they are running strong over there. They got a pipeline directly from Mexico to the Twin Cities, and that is 100% where all the meth in this area comes from. It is not cooked in the United States anymore. When they really crack down on the amount of Sudafed we could buy and things like that, also like if you were to show up at Ace Hardware and buy a truck full of anhydrous ammonia, well, you can't really get that there, but if you were to show up and try to buy a trailer of anhydrous ammonia or buy a ton of Red Devil Lye or things like that, I would find out about you. Same as when people show up and try to, get all their buddies to go buy piles of Sudafed, we find out about it, and all of a sudden we're stealing their trash in the middle of the night to see if we can find meth precursors in their trash. So by getting rid of those chemicals or making them super hard to get, meth labs in the United States are almost non-existent. But if anybody's seen the TV series Breaking Bad, what they depict there is very accurate, what's happening in Mexico. They truly have factories where meth is being produced. They have chemists on their payroll. The chemists get paid really, really well, but they don't really have any choice, because if they were to tell them no, they would just kill them and their families. So they can make them a millionaire, or they can kill everybody that they love. That's not their choice. So they've got chemists that are producing meth, and because of that, we're seeing purity levels that we've never seen in years prior. For the past 5 years, all of my federal cases I work, part of the deal is I send the drugs that we seize down to a DEA lab in Chicago, and one of the things that happens is I receive purity testing on it, and I've never had Mexican meth come back less than 97% pure. So it's really pure, it's extremely addicting, it's awful stuff. It's not the most expensive drug we're gonna talk about, but it's also not cheap, considering people, when they get strung out on meth, have a real difficult time keeping jobs and things like that. Roughly going right now for $40 to $60 per gram, $300 per ounce, and when we buy pounds of meth, we're usually spending $2,700 to $3,000 on a pound right now. Go ahead. This is a pound of meth right here that I bought 2 years ago. It was all over the news, and that when we took this guy off, I had done 10 undercover buys into this guy. He was running an auto shop, which they weren't actually doing any auto work, over on Western Avenue in Eau Claire. It was bought a lot of fentanyl from him too. So that's what meth looks like. So it looks like large pieces of meth are going to look like white crystals. Small, like more of like a user size amount of meth would just be crushed up white kind of crystally stuff. Yeah.
So when you see something like this, how do you dispose of it?
It gets sent to, this was part of a federal case, so this got sent to that lab in Chicago, and then they disposed of it. If it doesn't go as a federal case and we keep it in state court, our evidence lab holds onto it until the time limits are up for all appeals or anything like that could possibly happen. And then up in Barron County, there's an incinerator that our evidence technicians will haul all of the drugs in batches to, and they incinerate them up there. This is just meth paraphernalia, so some things that you might see in a house. The most common ways to use meth are smoking it or injecting it. You can snort it, you can eat it, a lot of other ways that you can ingest it, but the most common ways are going to be with a needle or with that little glass pipe on the right. That's commonly referred to as a bubble. It's a glass tube with a glass bubble on the end, and that glass bubble will have a little hole on top. They take a little piece of meth and drop it inside that hole, and then they heat that glass pipe and smoke it from there. Another thing that you can look for is burnt pieces of tin foil, usually a square about this big of tin foil, and they'll take meth and they'll put it on top of that tin foil, and they'll heat it from the bottom with a lighter. Smoke will come up, and they'll take a straw or something like that, and they'll suck that smoke in. They call it burning hot rails. It's a hot rail is what that's referred to. Go ahead.
Why did they choose to do it like that?
Yeah.
It's all different highs. Every way that you ingest it's gonna give you a little bit different high. It doesn't taste good, and also eating it takes longer to feel it. The fastest way to get high and the most intense high is gonna be injecting it. Usually a meth user will start out smoking it, and then they'll eventually graduate into injecting it. Because like every other drug, it gets in your brain, and the very first time meth particularly you use it, it's the greatest high you could ever imagine. Beats everything that you can think of. But every time you do it, it knocks off those receptors in your brain, and eventually you stop feeling good about anything anymore. Getting high is the only thing that makes you feel good. And now smoking doesn't get you that, so now you go to injecting because it's a little bit more. It trips it a little bit more, but that only lasts so long, and all of a sudden they call it banging. That's when you're injecting meth. Now you're banging meth several times a day to try to chase what's left of that feeling, basically.
Kills the dopamine receptor.
Yep. So So meth does a lot of wild stuff, but it causes people to be super paranoid. We go through phones on all the cases that we work, and you wouldn't believe the amount of people that are convinced we are following them day and night, that we have helicopters up following them, you know, whatever. They think everybody's the cops. They could very well think that you're a police officer, like if they're living next to somewhere you're doing a home inspection at, and they just see you walking around the yard. I have no doubt that they would think that you're, you know, one of us, whatever, trying to get an eye on their property or something like that. They get super paranoid and goofy about that stuff. This says meth users can display superhuman strength. It's not quite like if anybody's seen like videos of people on PCP where they like literally you cannot control them and they're oblivious to pain and all that sort of stuff. Meth doesn't quite have that effect, but it gets people real wild. They can be pretty out of control, and it makes them become pretty dangerous. Yeah. So. Meth, I talked about the purity level, and because of that, it's even more so addictive than it ever was. Well over, I would say 93% of people that are meth addicts that get clean return to using meth. Part of my job is working with confidential informants. I've had hundreds of confidential informants now in my time doing this. Most of them are drug addicts. They help me build cases on people. Sometimes if I can't do an undercover buy into a group of people because they don't trust outside people, I'll have a confidential informant do it. We got wires and stuff we hook them up with and recording devices and that, and I'll give them money and send them into a house to go buy drugs and that sort of stuff. But when I work with those people, part of the deal too is they're not allowed to use drugs, and we help them try it to help them get into treatment and get clean and get their lives better. We'll pay them sometimes, help them with, you know, daycare money or gas money, whatever they need. The only ones that I've had that successfully stay clean for an extended amount of time, like years, are the ones that can leave the area. They have family living in another state or something like that, and they can just pack up and leave, because here they have burnt so many bridges that the only friends they have left aren't really friends, or just people that they get high with. So they got nothing to go to. So as soon as they get let loose from me watching them, they're right back into it again, and all of a sudden we're working a case on an old informant. So it's pretty bad. The highs used to be a little bit shorter, but with the purity pumping up so high, a meth high will last a good 12 hours. But somebody that's on a meth bender, they'll be awake for like 5 days straight, where they're not sleeping. So, but they're smoking, they get high, they smoke again, they get high, so they got a ton of meth pumping through their system. Meth is a stimulant, so it's going to cause everything to increase in your body: your heart rate, your respiration, your blood pressure. It's going to cause sweating. One thing, somebody on meth, if you encounter somebody, they can't stop moving. If they're high on meth, they cannot sit down and just not move. So they'll start flailing their arms around. A lot of times they're touching their forearms or their face. That seems like that's kind of the go-to spots that they really focus on touching. But then you also notice some stuff with skin and teeth. Tooth decay is from smoking meth, from all those chemicals in it on your teeth. And then you'll see a lot of skin sores with people using meth. A little bit less now than with the old meth that was being cooked in the US, because that stuff was super, super dirty. With the Mexican meth, we don't see it quite to that level, but you still see it, because your body recognizes meth as a poison. They ingest all this stuff. They ingest so much meth that I have seen it several times where we've gone in to do search warrants on people, and they're cooking their own urine in hot plates to cook the liquid out of it, because there's going to be meth left over in their urine, and they're getting high off of urine meth. So that's how much is going through your body, that there's still enough that they can actually get high, like probably one more time off of meth that's coming out of their urine. So you got all that cruising through your body, and your body trying to get rid of poisons when it identifies it. And one way it does it is by sweating it out of yourself. And there's so much nasty chemicals in here, as it's sweating out, it creates chemical burns in your pores and your skin. Those get itchy, they scratch them. People aren't living in clean situations. A lot of them have got MRSA and things like that. So you scratch them, live in a dirty spot, your fingers are dirty, whatever it may be, all of a sudden that gets infected, and now people got MRSA all over their faces and their arms and stuff like that. So that's what is causing that sort of thing when you see that with a meth user. These are from the old Faces of Meth campaign, if anyone remembers that, the billboards that had the, trying to convince people to not use meth, which you think, I mean, seeing what it does to you would be enough for most people, but clearly it's not the case. But I've seen these changes happen. You can flip to the next one too. In as little as like 6 months sometimes with some people, heavy meth users. I've literally taken my computer in to do interviews with people that I'm trying to flip as informants, and I pull up a booking photo of them or a mugshot from when they first started getting in trouble, and then I show them their most recent one and show them, hey, this is what you're doing to yourself. I mean, we can get out of it, but it's like right now. Meth causes people to be super hostile towards other people. Part of it's because of just the agitation of sleeping, being paranoid, all that sort of thing. But it also causes people to commit a ton of other crimes to support their habit because they don't have jobs. They can't hold a job down when you're living like that. So we have meth dealers have people that they call boosters. And a booster is somebody that they'll give the dealer will give a shopping list to somebody that wants to be a customer, but they don't want to have to spend their own money on drugs. So they'll essentially give them a shopping list, and that person will go to Walmart, let's say, and they'll load up a whole cart full of stuff. Whatever's on that list, they just push it right out the door, and they steal it because they know the loss prevention can't physically stop them. So as long as they get out of there before law enforcement makes it, they don't care that they're going to get arrested 4 days down the road from a warrant or anything like that. They just know they're going to get a bag of meth as soon as they drop the stuff off, and that's all they care about. So a ton of retail thefts. Excuse me. Almost all of our like job site break-ins, copper thefts, things like that, are all attributed to meth users. A lot of things, storage lockers, they're looking for power tools and stuff, anything they can easily take to a pawn shop and sell, that's what they're trying to steal, and it happens all the time. And then we talked about users end up kind of having to choose between the drugs and their family, and unfortunately, they oftentimes choose the drugs, at least for quite a while, and that's what makes it real tough to get off the drugs when they finally want to. They don't have any kind of support system left anymore. Cocaine, less prevalent than meth, but it's definitely around. I've got a couple big cocaine cases I'm working right now. On the left, that's a kilo brick of cocaine that I seized last year off of one of the groups I was working. You can see it's got salsa stamped on it. All of the cartels, so cocaine is always originally produced in the jungle in either Colombia, Peru, or Bolivia. All 100% of cocaine comes from that area. And when they're in the jungle, they process it, it turns into like a paste, then they harden it up into bricks, and before it's hard, every cartel puts their stamp on it to claim it as theirs. And they wrap it in cellophane, they'll wrap it in several layers of electrical tape covered in motor oil or diesel fuel or all sorts of things to try to mask the odors for dogs. It doesn't work, a dog smells through all that sort of stuff, but still stuff that they do. So that's what it looks like when you cut open a fresh kilo of cocaine. That kilo right there on the cheap end is worth about $30,000. Cocaine comes here obviously from outside of the Chippewa Valley, but we see cocaine coming from not just the Twin Cities. It also comes from Milwaukee, Chicago. Talked about the case last year I worked that it was coming up from Texas. It was going from Texas to Milwaukee and then to this area. It's pretty expensive, and powder cocaine costs more than crack. Crack is looked at on the same level as meth, where powder cocaine is looked at as more of a kind of a party drug. But these are pictures from, what's that?
What's the difference between that crack and that powder?
I'll show you here. These are pictures of both. On the left are a whole bunch of bags of powder cocaine that we seized, and on the right is a bag of crack that I bought about 3 months ago from a crack dealer here in Eau Claire. Not a lot of crack around. We have powder cocaine, but we don't see crack often. So I kind of jumped at the opportunity to do a first crack buy in quite a while. Crack starts out as powder cocaine, but it's cooked down Impurities get cooked out of it and stuff. They mix it with baking soda and they essentially cook it down to a hard rock. It gives a different high. It's a much more intense high, but it's a different high, and it's really, 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 really addictive. It's a huge problem in a lot of like inner city areas and stuff where they don't have a lot of meth, but where they don't have meth, they have crack. That's kind of how that works. Some cocaine paraphernalia you can look for. On the right, usually powder cocaine is going to be kept in either little clear baggies, gem bags, or in like a little vial. And you're going to notice powder on typically any kind of a flat, glassy type surface. Mirrors, glass coffee table, or dining room table, or excuse me, a coffee table or end table, something like that. I've seen people use their cell phones, just the flat, glass in their cell phones to put a line on. And then you'll find either cut straws or tight rolled up dollar bills and things like that for snorting. On the left in that picture was a crack pipe. A crack pipe is a little glass cylinder about this long, and then on one end it's going to have a Brillo pad, a little chunk of Brillo pad stuffed inside. And the purpose of the Brillo pad is it kind of acts as a filter or a stop. They'll take a piece of crack rock, jam it inside that little glass pipe, and they heat it. And one thing to talk about a little bit here, crack users a lot of times will have burnt fingertips and lips because that little tiny pipe gets really hot, because the crack rock doesn't burn unless flame is being kept to it all the time. You can't light it on fire. It's not like a cigarette where you light it and it stays on fire until you want to be done with it. So you got to keep it hot. That little tiny glass pipe gets really, really hot on their lips and their fingertips. This is more crack on the right. Crack is going to look like the best description I have for it, and you can see it there, is like an old piece of white bar soap. Like if you broke off a little chunk of white bar soap, that kind of is what crack sort of looks like. If it's fresh, it'll look wet inside the bags that it's in because it's cooked in liquid to process it. It's usually an off-white color, and we don't have a lot of it around here. The likelihood of you seeing it around here is fairly slim, but you could. So cocaine is a stimulant, just like meth. It's a less powerful stimulant. It's going to cause the same symptoms, but they're going to be shorter lived. It's going to cause, same thing, elevated heart rate, elevated blood pressure, respiratory rate, all that sort of stuff. It can cause tooth decay. It'll cause issues with the nose. But cocaine is almost always snorted, and crack is essentially always smoked. There's not any other way, really, besides smoking crack to use it. You can't really crush up a crack rock and then snort it. I've had informants that I've worked with in the past that inject cocaine. They'll mix it with water, and they'll dilute it down, and then they inject it. It just creates a different high. That's all the only reason for that. It's a super intense, immediate high, but it only lasts about 15 minutes. So somebody that's addicted to powder cocaine, it becomes expensive really fast. It's easily about $100 per gram right now if you were to buy like just street level user amounts of cocaine around this area. Go ahead.
How long does a gram last though?
A person would likely go through a gram in like a night of like out partying and stuff. If you were hanging out with a few buddies and everybody was using it, you'd go through a couple grams in a night most likely.
What does an 8-ball go for nowadays?
$300, $250.
What's the name?
3.5 grams. So 8-ball is slang term for 3.5 grams, or 1/8 of an ounce. Drug prices for cocaine and meth are broke down typically in what's called a teener, or now it's even being dumbed down to t-shirt. That's a 1/16 of an ounce, so 1.75 grams. An 8-ball is 3.5 grams, and then they have from there you can buy what's called a quarter zip, or a quarter ounce, half zip, half ounce, full zip, or you get up into like the quarter pound, half pound to a pound. That's kind of the breakdown when you get there. If you get up to a pound, typically you're just dealing in multi-pounds at that point. Some other things that you notice from somebody using cocaine, going to be dilated pupils. You see people sweating a lot and stuff like that. But along with meth, if somebody overdoses from a stimulant, they usually have a heart attack. That's what the drugs will eventually do that would cause an overdose for them. And, you know, that's something that's possible at any time with those sorts of drugs. Another thing that you can notice from somebody using powder cocaine is gonna be like a red face, runny nose, real red like around the nose, and then like constantly sniffling and stuff like that. It can do a lot of damage to the inside of your tissue in your nose as well. We talked about crack users having burn marks, but then it also causes respiratory issues just because all that junk. Same as meth, it's not good for your lungs. Heroin and fentanyl, second most prevalent drug that I deal with, but it's the biggest problem around here as far as what's killing people. Been a ton of overdose deaths in the past handful of years. I'm sure everybody's seen or heard about them on the news. You may have known people involved in these things. They're pretty awful. It's expensive. So when I'm buying street level amount, I'm buying a point, is what it's called. A point is 1/10 of a gram of fentanyl or heroin. That's what a user amount, like a low level user, is gonna be buying. They don't really sell it in smaller amounts than that, but a point will get you real high. A point, 1/10 of a gram. So imagine an average size paper clip that weighs 1 gram. You break that into 10 separate equal pieces, and each one of those is at least $20 right now, worth of heroin or fentanyl. Unfortunately, these aren't chemists or really anybody with any sense to themselves that are mixing these drugs, because they're mixing fentanyl into everything. I haven't bought, it's been years since I bought actual heroin anymore. Everything I buy has fentanyl mixed in it now. And it's not a chemist that's doing the mixing. It's some idiot drug dealer sitting in his living room, whips it together in a bowl or something like that and starts bagging it up. So a point, if you were to get a point of pure fentanyl and you use that, you would die. That's enough fentanyl to kill you. We got a slide coming up that's gonna show lethal amounts of fentanyl compared to heroin, but it does not take much. Heroin and fentanyl is coming into the US mostly from Mexico and China. Pure fentanyl was almost entirely being manufactured in China in clandestine labs, but that's kind of bullshit term because in China and Mexico, the governments fully know what's happening at these places. They just choose to turn a blind eye to it. They're making money off of it, they're corrupt, there's all sorts of different reasons. But fentanyl is entirely lab-made chemical. Heroin at least begins as an organic material. You have to have a poppy plant in order to begin with heroin. So when it was just heroin, most of that was coming from Afghanistan, several places in the Middle East, in the Far East, so in Asia and things like that. A lot of the Taliban's efforts were being supplied by their sale of poppy plants and opium that they were producing, which was becoming heroin. Fentanyl is 100% made in labs. We get intelligence from DEA based on goings-on in other countries, and it's been confirmed many times over that the cartels in Mexico have paid for the chemists working in these labs in China to come to Mexico and instruct them on how to begin making their own fentanyl in Mexico as well. We got a picture coming up, but one of the most common ways that we're buying fentanyl right now here are in the form of counterfeit pills that are made to look like prescription medications, but they're fentanyl. And the people that are using them know that they're fentanyl, mostly. But they were being mass produced by the same cartels that were producing meth. And probably 4 or 5 years ago, when we would buy large amounts of meth by the pound, they were giving us sandwich bags filled with these counterfeit fentanyl pills just for free. Just, hey, give them to your people that you're selling your meth to. They thought we were meth dealers, so just pass these out. All they were trying to do was get everybody in this area hooked on these fentanyl pills, because then, within about a year, they'd still get us them, but they wanted $20 per pill. So it's valuable. They were just giving them out for free though, because they wanted to get everybody here hooked on fentanyl. So it's pretty sneaky, but that's what they're doing. heroin and fentanyl look like a lot of different things. So I've got some pictures coming up here to kind of show. Pure heroin, kind of an off-white brown powder. Black tar heroin, black, really sticky, and it smells like vinegar. But powdered fentanyl is scary because it could look like anything. Our patrol officers, you know, it used to be if you found white powder on the street, you could pretty well just assume that was cocaine and, you know, you're fine. Our patrol officers have been told, don't even field test a powder unless you know exactly what it is anymore. They bag it up, they double bag it, they bring it down to the police department, and then through the drug task force, we bought a mass spectrometer that I can take to the evidence area, and I remove that fentanyl, got a negative pressure vent hood that I put it under, and then I shoot it with a laser from the mass spectrometer to figure out what's inside because it's so dangerous. I mean, the pill form is less dangerous because you'd have to actually ingest the fentanyl that's pressed into these pills, but the powder stuff, it's such fine powder, if that got airborne and you breathed a nose full of it in just because the wind blew it into your face on a traffic stop, it'd probably kill you. I mean, you'd have to get Narcan for sure.
Can it get absorbed into your skin too if you touch it?
It could, yeah. Yeah, it would be slower happening that way, but it absolutely can, yeah. Go ahead. Talked about fentanyl being a synthetic opiate, and it's used in conjunction with heroin. So fentanyl and heroin are sold on the street by the slang term down because they're a depressant. That's when somebody's either selling or we're trying to buy fentanyl or heroin. It's kind of the names are interchangeable at this point in the game. We're asking for down, and it's one of the two, and then we won't even know what it is until we get it back and field test it. Half the time, if it's some low-level dealer, they don't even know if it's actually heroin, fentanyl, you know, or what combination of the two. So we have to get it back and test it. But fentanyl is 80 to 100 times stronger than morphine. Heroin is about 50 times stronger. So fentanyl's at least, I would say, twice as strong as heroin. But they'll add it to heroin to increase the potency. Heroin and cocaine are both drugs that the farther you are away from the source of supply in the United States, the weaker your drugs get. Because every person that gets their hand on the first person that gets their hand on that kilo brick when it comes into the United States, takes that kilo, they break that brick down, and you can re-rock a brick, so you can make it look like it's a new brick again. They break that brick down, so they take 1 kilo of pretty much pure drugs. They take another kilo of junk, any kind of powder that matches generally the color of what that brick was. So lactose, vitamin D, baby laxatives, all sorts of stuff, you name it. If they can get it in white powder form, they'll mix it in with all this crap, then they have 2 kilos. So for that, like the cocaine, let's say, that's a $30,000 kilo. Now that dealer's got $60,000 worth of product. So it's good business for them to do it, but the next guy's getting crap. Well, by the time it makes it to Eau Claire, there's a lot of crap. There's more crap than there is drugs sometimes in that bag. So as far as heroin goes, that's called stepping on it. It's been stepped on so many times by the time it gets here that they're mixing fentanyl into it to bump the potency back up. And unfortunately, it's good business for a heroin dealer when word gets out that people are dying from the product, because that's telling the world that it's strong, and that's what they're after. So they'll mix fentanyl in it to bump the potency up, and I talked about the fact that these aren't chemists mixing fentanyl. Or you've got some idiot whipping it together with a spoon or a stir straw or something like that, and that's how they're mixing. There's no quality control here. So that is unfortunately exactly what causes all of the overdoses.
Is fentanyl cheaper to produce? Is that why they mix it in? Or?
No, fentanyl's pretty expensive, but a little bit goes a really long way. So comparatively, it's cheap to make your bag of heroin really strong now. It's such a problem that I went to a training years ago that was put on by a group out of Baltimore, and it was regarding overdoses. And they talked about, they tracked their overdoses, and they tracked overdoses in New York City, because Baltimore's drugs come from New York. And they noticed that when New York would have a big rash of overdose deaths, Baltimore would have them about a week later. That was about how long it was taking for that hot batch of heroin or fentanyl to make it to their place. So they decided they'd get ahead of it, and they put a press release out. The news broadcasted, hey, everybody be real careful, there's this hot batch of fentanyl coming, they're all dying left and right up in New York, don't buy your fentanyl. It had the absolute opposite effect. Everybody wanted to get their hands on that because that just told them that was the strongest drugs. They were gonna get more bang for their buck. So then they had a giant batch of overdose deaths that occurred from that. So,
What is the,
So, telling drug dealers or drug addicts, don't go buy your drugs, that didn't work?
yeah. Not even don't go buy your drugs, it's don't go buy your drugs, this is going to kill you.
Yeah. I can imagine that not working.
Yeah.
what is the, so I have a daughter in middle school, what's like the, where are you seeing it? Are you seeing it in middle school, elementary schools, just high schools?
No. I haven't seen fentanyl in a high school yet. Eau Claire had a couple students last year, the year before, that they found some meth on at one point, but I have not heard of fentanyl being in the school. The problem is, and we'll get into it here in a little bit, and you'll see, the problem is, and this is, I talk to kids groups too, I do a kid version of sort of this presentation for kid groups. Kids taking what they think is a prescription medication, and they end up with fentanyl. Unfortunately, we've had college kids die because they are out at the bar, whatever it may be. They get so the most common counterfeit fentanyl pills are stamped to look like oxys. So some college kid, and this has happened a handful of times in Eau Claire alone, out at the bar, gets their hands on one oxy from a friend that probably also thought it was an oxy, that got it from, who knows who else. They get home, they get all liquored up, they get home and they decide they're gonna snort their oxy before they go to bed. So they crush up their oxy and they snort it. This kid's never done fentanyl in his life. A seasoned fentanyl users often tell me that they take one of those pills and break it into quarters. And they crush a quarter of that up and use it, and that still makes them overdose. There's not enough Narcan in the city of Eau Claire to bring that college kid back. Even if somebody was there with all that Narcan when it happened. There's just not enough there. That is an absolute lethal dose of fentanyl. So that's where the biggest problem with fentanyl comes in right now is these pills.
What about any of the other ones? Are you seeing any of it in any of the schools? Anything from cocaine or?
Yeah, we see cocaine. We'll get into pills too. Pills are a big problem with the schools. We've had some young kids die from prescription pills, but abusing them. They have pill parties that we'll talk about and stuff.
Are they disguised as like Advil, Tylenol?
No, they take them. A lot of it's people raiding mom and dad or grandpa and grandma's medicine cabinet, and they go to a party and they all just start eating pills together. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, we talked about everything here. So these are lethal doses of both. So that just kind of shows you. This is pure heroin and pure fentanyl. That's how much fentanyl it takes to kill you.
That's not a lot of fentanyl.
Yeah, like you were saying, it doesn't take much for even to hit.
No, it sure doesn't. Go ahead. It's pretty expensive here. We talked about low level. You can't even probably see how close my fingers are. That's how much a point fits into right there. That's $20 worth of fentanyl or heroin. Sometimes more. It just depends. It's usually injected or snorted. You can snort up that little tiny bit of fentanyl. It's almost always injected though. They do smoke fentanyl in the same way that I was talking about, where meth users will put some on tin foil and they'll heat it and suck up the smoke. People do that also, especially if they're using as a group. One of them will light up some fentanyl and they'll just suck off of the smoke from it. But almost always it's injected. And the only thing that counteracts an overdose from these is Narcan, nothing else. You can do CPR on the person for as long as you would like. It'll help things, hopefully, not completely shut down. They can get into the hospital, but they'll start administering Narcan, and a lot of times with fentanyl, there's not even enough Narcan on the ambulance. They have to keep them basically trying to resuscitate them until they can get to the hospital and hook them up to basically a steady drip of Narcan into them, where they're in a coma until they finally snap out of it sometimes. One thing that everybody needs to be real careful for is hypodermic needles, because that is the most common way to use this drug. There's going to be a lot of hypodermic needles around people that use it. And heroin and fentanyl, that addiction hits those users in a different way than meth or anything like that. Like meth, They gotta have it to feel good, they gotta have it to be happy, you know, whatever. This, when they're coming down, they truly feel like they're gonna die. Every bone in their body feels like it's breaking, they're sweating, they're vomiting, they get bad diarrhea, like it's rough. So they want to get high as often as they can. So absolutely, if you have 5-6 people hanging out and there's a couple points of heroin or fentanyl, but there's only one needle to go around, they're all sharing that needle every single time without question. Every single one of my informants that have been like a long-term fentanyl or heroin user, almost every single one of them has some sort of a communicable disease, whether it be hepatitis, HIV, you know, something like that. So be very careful with needles. These are track marks. This is something that you might notice on the inside of somebody's arm, but they also have them other places. These are both on the insides of arms. These are from repeated use in the same spot with a needle, and usually not a clean needle or not clean situation. These are infected, and that's what happens. They become infected. But people, these are on the inside of arms. People will have them all over their body. Sometimes it's because the veins in their arms become unusable from getting poked so many times. Some of it's because they're trying to hide it from people. So people will shoot up on the tops of their feet, all over the place, just anywhere they can find a vein, if that's what they're looking for, but then if they're trying to hide it, they can get pretty creative.
So does it has to go straight in a vein? It can't be like when the doctor gives you a shot and they stick it in the muscle and...
No, they gotta go right into a vein with it. More things to watch for. That picture is the typical, what we call a drug kit that users will carry with them. You got needles, excuse me, you've got something to keep the drugs in. We'll put a little bit of liquid in there with it, we'll cook it in. And then that little white thing in the center is a cotton swab, and they'll just draw the liquid through that cotton swab into the needle, and it sort of acts as a filter, because if they were to ingest or inject a chunk of heroin or fentanyl, that would likely kill them as well. So these are the counterfeit pills. These are stamped to look like Oxy. Can't see them super clearly with the lighting, I guess, but if you were to look at them well, you can see that they're not legitimate pills. They're not uniform blue, they're blotchy, they're gonna have little bits of darker blue or white within them, and then they're gonna be kind of crumbly. Unfortunately, the drunk college kids and things like that aren't paying attention to that sort of stuff. I don't think that they were produced to trick anybody. I don't think that was what the cartels were producing them to look like these for. It's more to disguise them, to try to get them across the border, to pass law enforcement, you know, that sort of stuff. But everybody's on to them now. This is pure heroin, kind of an off-white, it's fine powder. You just don't see much of this anymore. This is black tar heroin. Biggest thing with that is it looks like a piece of tar. And if I had one sitting, just a chunk this big, sitting on the table right here, you guys would for sure be able to smell it up close. It would smell like vinegar. And this is fentanyl, and this is what I talked about with fentanyl. All of those bags, there's yellow, blue, purple, white. All of those are the same thing. They're all fentanyl, but they all look different. I bought green fentanyl. I bought every color out there of fentanyl, because all they do is find whatever color powder dye, and mix it in with their mix. Some of it's for branding for different groups that are selling drugs. They'll claim theirs as, you know, the purple stuff or the green stuff. We had one guy that was coming here from East St. Paul that we put a big case on years ago, and we kept hearing about green fentanyl that people were dying from, and it turns out it was this guy, Corey Hobbs was his name. We put a big case on him and sent him to prison for a long time. But he was responsible for all of the green fentanyl in the area, which is kind of dumb, because we were able to attribute a whole bunch of like overdose deaths to him and things like that, because he went ahead and essentially trademarked his drugs. So uses last, or effects from the use last for several hours. And heroin and fentanyl are a depressant, so it's going to slow everything in your body down. So you're going to get slower respiratory rate, heart rate, blood pressure, things like that. And an overdose from this is somebody going into respiratory arrest, where eventually their lungs stop working. Unfortunately, I've been to too many autopsies for people that have died from overdose deaths, and one thing that's that's there on every one of them is their lungs are significantly heavier. They weigh more than a normal person's because of all the fluid that they begin retaining as they're overdosing. And it's not usually, it's always caused by the purity of the heroin and fentanyl used. Go ahead. So it slows everything down, and it's gonna sound crazy. The ideal high somebody can achieve is getting what's called the nod. The nod is where they're basically in a coma, but not so much that they don't know what's going on around them. They just can't react to it. They have slowed themselves down so much that they'll be sitting in this chair, slumped over, drooling, snot down the front of them. They can't respond to anything. I mean, you could go up and poke them in the eye and they can't do anything about it, but they can hear everything that's happening and they'll remember it. So you can't go in and like start really kind of talking crap to them and stuff like that. And then later on try to go flip them and, you know, make them an informant or whatever, because they're going to be pissed off because they'll remember all the stuff that was happening. Their body has been slowed down though. When they're at that point, they have achieved the ultimate high just prior to overdosing. Like a little bit more, just a little bit more potent drugs, a little bit more product, and they would be dying now. So they're right kind of at that verge.
Do you ever see people doing both, a downer and an upper?
Yep, speedballing. Yep, they call it speedballing. Yeah, yeah. You see it with cocaine. That's what killed a lot of, like, it was big back in the 70s. John Belushi, that's what he died from. If I remember right, Chris Farley died from speedball. That was kind of big back, you know, with celebrities, especially back then. They'll do it now. A lot of meth and fentanyl mixtures and things like that. We also see a lot of meth users smoking marijuana. They'll always have marijuana with them when they get too high, they'll smoke marijuana to try to bring them back closer to, you know, normal. Some other effects are going to be like tooth decay, loss of appetite, and then obviously death. And then we talked about the transmission of diseases from sharing needles. Ecstasy or MDMA, in the original form it was MDMA. It was created back, way back when as an experimental medicine, basically, but it was banned in 1985 for that. Now it's a party drug. We see it at raves and amongst mostly like the college crowd and stuff. These are ecstasy pills. They're also pressed pills, but they do not try to hide the fact that they are not legitimate. They're bright colored. Most of the ones I see around here have got like a Nike symbol stamped in them or a little pistol or something like that. So they don't even, they're not trying to disguise them as legitimate medications. They are ecstasy, and that's just what they are. It actually nowadays contains very little MDMA, and it contains a whole bunch of other crap. It can have LSD in it, can have cocaine, meth, caffeine. We've seen rat poison in them. I mean, all sorts of crap. Go ahead. It's a stimulant, so you're going to see a lot of the same effects as meth and cocaine. Ecstasy causes a whole lot of sweating. Like, people will be just dripping in sweat. You'll see, like, if you've ever seen pictures of people at raves, it's big at raves and stuff, and they're just like soaking wet in sweat. They're probably on ecstasy. Ecstasy or maybe Molly, which we'll talk about next, which is pure MDMA. Go ahead. It kind of is a shock to your system. It can cause some kidney issues, but it also kind of messes with your brain as well. Molly is supposed to be basically pure MDMA, though it's not necessarily pure. It's also more of a party drug in this area. But Molly, or pure MDMA, almost always comes here through the dark web from China. It's also manufactured in labs in China. Molly, most of the time when we see it, is in these generic vitamin capsules, just a clear, like a multivitamin type of a capsule. You can get them on Amazon, things like that. They fill them with MDMA and sell them. It's also a stimulant, So you also see a lot of sweating, you see rapid heartbeat, high blood pressure. Usually it's going to be kind of a yellowish brown tinted powdery crystal. LSD, not around here a whole lot, although we did a search warrant this morning where we got a bunch of LSD from a house that we hit. It's a hallucinogen. It's made from it's an acid found that it grows on a fungus that grows on some vegetation. Usually, and the stuff that we see today in the search warrant, it's usually processed into a liquid and then it's put on top of absorbent blotter paper. So this piece of paper, that's what the lips and things like that are right there. It's a piece of paper, thin paper, that absorbs the liquid, and then it has tiny little perforated squares on it. So they'll sell one of those little squares to somebody. You break off that little square, you put it on your tongue and you eat it, and within 30 to 90 minutes you're seeing purple elephants running down the street.
Tasty colors.
Yeah, yes, yeah, go ahead. A high is a trip. You can get bad trips, and that's where the police usually end up getting called by a neighbor that sees usually college kids losing their absolute minds out in their yard, running and hiding from things that don't exist. There's nothing that the police officers can really do besides they'll coax them to usually go to the hospital and get them hooked up to at least monitor them, make sure they don't have a heart attack and stuff like that. But until it wears off, there's not a whole lot you can do for them.
I'm guessing there are certain areas in like Eau Claire, Chippewa, that's, so like for us, for inspecting, like an area where if we're doing a home in, say, downtown where the old ghetto king Burger King used to be, are there areas that we can know about where if we're going down to do a home in that area? Or
That area, you could encounter everything that we just talked about in that area. This, ecstasy, Molly, is gonna be more common in Eau Claire. It's gonna be more common down in like the college rental areas, so Water Street and the streets kind of branching out from there. The warrant we did today, where we had this and a whole bunch of other stuff that we just talked about, was on Chippewa Street. 500 block of Chippewa Street, so right down in the heart of that area. So this is the blotter paper. You can see the little perforated squares. Somebody would just break off one of those and eat it, and they would get real high. One of the problems with it is it does take 30 to 90 minutes for that high to kick in. So you get a group of kids that none of them know what the hell they're doing, but they all want to see crazy stuff or taste the color purple. They get themselves a blotter paper and they all eat a square. They're 15 minutes into it and I don't feel anything yet. They eat another square, another half hour into it, maybe it's not kicking in yet. They eat another square. Now they've taken 3 times the LSD that a person would normally take to see that, and they've never had it before, and it's gonna hit them all basically at one time, and it's gonna hit them really, really hard. And that's where usually the police end up getting called by neighbors and stuff that see the craziness happening. Prescription pill or prescription medicine abuse in general is really big. Talked about that's a problem with a lot of high school kids at parties. There are websites that you can find that you can go and find basically like a cocktail cookbook on what pills to mix to achieve whatever high you're trying to get. And these high school kids know about this stuff. So they have pill parties where every kid that shows up will bring whatever handful of pills they were able to find from mom and dad's medicine cabinet, grandpa and grandma's, whatever, and they'll all go sit down and they'll all eat pills together at a party. And we've had high school kids die from that. It's awful, but it's definitely a problem, and it's one thing that I talk to all the kid groups that I do presentations for all the time is not taking pills from anybody but basically your parent at this point, because you can't even trust necessarily that your friend, the pill they're giving you isn't fentanyl, and they don't realize it, People do a lot of stealing pills. They abuse them or they sell them. It's a big problem, mostly the meth user community. will pay attention to when somebody dies, whether it's a friend of a friend, or they're seeing an obituary, or whatever. And after that person dies, they break into that person's house and they steal their pills, especially if it's somebody they knew died of cancer or something like that, or they're gonna have a lot of prescription medicine, especially like heavy pain meds and stuff. They'll break in their house and steal all those medicines. And they sell them. People also doctor shop. We get calls often from pharmacies or doctor offices from people that are persistently showing up demanding narcotic pain medicines and things like that. Every now and then we'll hear about a pharmacist that's giving out bogus prescriptions for people. Last one was a couple of years ago up north that we had one. And then people also will sell their own prescribed medicines too. This is just a list of some of the pretty commonly abused medicines. A good doctor, if they've got you on something like this, a good doctor should give you limited prescriptions and really be monitoring it. I know when I was in the Army, this was at a time when the military's way of treating everything was just throwing pills at it so that you didn't have any pain from anything. I had an injury and they gave me an unlimited supply of Percocet as long as I wanted to keep renewing it. And I took it until I didn't need it anymore, and then I dumped them all and that. But I know that there was guys that didn't do that also, you know. Go ahead. Another commonly abused prescription medicine is codeine, cough syrup. It's called lean. It's big in the rap community apparently. Not really my thing, but they'll take their word for it. They take codeine, put it in a cup, they'll mix Sprite, and then they take a Jolly Rancher and drop a Jolly Rancher in there, stir it around till it dissolves, and they drink that concoction. It makes you hallucinate and that sort of thing. Marijuana, it's, as far as illegal drugs go, it's the most prevalent drug here and probably everywhere else too. We are surrounded by, on all borders, by places that it's legalized, so it's used to be mailed into this area almost always, and now it's just a few hour car drive to go pick it up. With the growing legalization, there's a lot of counties and stuff that are essentially decriminalizing smaller possession amounts of marijuana and things like that. Go ahead.
Didn't Eau Claire do that a few years back?
Yeah, so Eau Claire, if it's a small amount, they give you a citation. If it's a larger size amount, or if you've had a citation once before, then it's a criminal offense.
So how does that work with the dispensaries and the normal person selling on the street? I mean, how does?
So, even in the states where it's legal, you're not allowed to sell as like a street dealer. It has to be a legal dispensary to sell it. I don't know if it's, I'm sure it has absolutely hurt the street dealer community. Only thing is, like, I don't know anybody that's ever been a marijuana dealer that only sells marijuana. So, it's not, in my experience, it's not really been a thing. I'm sure that there's people out there, but that's not, we don't do a lot of marijuana cases for the drug task force because we have so many meth and fentanyl and things like that cases to occupy our time. But go ahead. Some things that you can watch for that would give you a pretty good indication that marijuana use or maybe sales are happening is going to be a lot of Ziploc or vacuum seal bags, or if you see a vacuum sealer like in a room that just looks strange, they got a vacuum sealer in there. That was the case with where we were at this morning. You'll smell it. It smells super strong. You'll smell marijuana. Air fresheners, if people are really going out of their way to change the odor of the air, that might be an indication that they got something they don't want you to smell. I know when I was on patrol, you would pull a car over, and on the way up to the car, you could smell the Axe body spray being sprayed in the car. You get up there, and every single vent on the dash, every vent slat on the dash had an air freshener jammed into it. I mean, they basically all but put a neon sign up that said, "Hey, can you search my car next?" I mean, So, and then there's always large amounts of cash that go with marijuana sales. That's even where it's legal at. I have friends that are in law enforcement in a lot of other states, and when Colorado legalized it first, they had these dispensaries and they're making money hand over fist. The problem is, all across the country, marijuana is still illegal to the federal government. And the federal government is the one that insures your money in the banks and things like that. So the dispensaries weren't allowed to put their money into banks because it was illegally obtained money to the federal government. So these dispensaries were sitting on massive amounts of cash. So people that probably used to be drug dealers that, you know, weren't anymore, they're just opportunists, I guess, were doing armed robberies on these dispensaries left and right. I mean, they were, all the time, they were having guys with masks and guns come into dispensaries and rob the place. So, kind of created a whole separate issue.
If you have all that cash, couldn't you hire guys with masks and guns to sit there and protect you against those other guys?
You probably could.
I mean,
When we went to Pikes Peak a couple of years ago, we went through Colorado Springs and
Yeah.
went past the dispensary, and it was out the door, down the block, and
Mhm.
around the corner, people lined up.
You know, same thing in like Las Vegas and stuff, yes.
I did a house down off Water Street, second story, went into the bedroom. Every 2 feet, there was an outlet
Yeah.
on every single wall, and then about 4 feet up, every 2 feet, there was an outlet on every single wall.
Yeah, that's probably a grow was happening there. Yeah. Butane hash oil become real popular around here. Butane hash oil is a way, it is what you get from a process where you would make a usable THC product off of what would have been garbage prior to the advent of this. So stems, seeds, things like that off of a marijuana plant aren't a desirable product. People want the leafy bud to smoke. So it used to be that all would get thrown away. Now you can take all that crap and put it in a glass vial, you fill it with butane, and that butane pulls all of the THC from what used to be junk. So then you take this extremely THC infused butane, they dump it onto a hot plate and they slowly cook it until it becomes a sludge. Ends up being a really, really high concentrated THC sludge, and they smoke that now. And that's what that is a picture of right there. And that is what I got. So, any questions?
what's with these places downtown that say they sell THC, like how is that legal?
There's not any actual THC being sold in Eau Claire legally. That's, they have Delta 8 is legal. They also have a product called THCA, which this is kind of the, somebody worked their way around this one because THCA is Delta 8 until it meets fire. As soon as it burns, it becomes Delta 9, which is illegal THC. But you can't collect the burnt drugs. So it's kind of, that's a goofy one. It's gonna end up being legalized in Wisconsin as well at some point. They keep creating things like that circumvent the law, and I mean, at that point, it's, how do you do anything about it? There's no way you can enforce that, because the illegal portion of it's getting blown out of their mouth in smoke at that point, you know?
Even catching them in the act, you would be able to.
No, because your evidence that you seize is not illegal.
How do some of these people find this stuff out, like extracting the extracting the THC from liquid butane?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
there has to be somebody
Yeah,
that does it
somebody did it
first to
first.
figure it
Yeah,
out.
yeah. That's been around for probably 8 years or so, something like that.
Chemist?
Surprisingly enough, Eau Claire was one of the first areas in this region to really have BHO is what it's called here. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. They're really resourceful though.
So Wayne, are we mandatory reporters? I mean, from a legal standpoint.
I don't think you are.
I know realtors,
Yeah.
you know, we make this term mandatory report.
I don't know that you
So
are.
if we see something.
Yeah.
You know, what is, I mean, not legal sense, but I always remember this one, many years ago, going on Main Street. One unit, apartment building, going through, everything was good except one unit, we walked in, and the chlorine smell was like, the buyer she couldn't
Yeah.
stand 2 minutes of it. My eyes, I'm just trying to go into the cleanup bar. But my eyes were burning. I mean, this is years ago, this
Yeah.
isn't like recently. Why? So when, and I remember, with no other reason, I told them, you told the owner of the building about it. So was that something to do with the manufacturing or something, or it's the only thing we could, I mean, why?
Yeah,
was that
it-
chlorine? It was amazing, it was like amazing.
So meth
So,
produces a lot of strong chemical smells, right? Smells very strongly of like acetone and stuff when it's being processed. So prior to meth labs entirely going away, because a true meth lab back when, in a sense, you probably wouldn't have run one in an apartment building in Eau Claire. That's the ones that people were putting in sheds, like out on, the back ends of properties and stuff. Because there was a lot of work and things like that were gonna need to go on, and a lot of chemicals to get hauled in and stuff. But then these one-pot meth labs became popular. And the one-pot meth lab was something that could be made in a 2-liter pot bottle. And you would put all your crap in there. You put fertilizer, you put the insides of lithium battery strips, all sorts of junk mixed inside there. And then you would seal it, and that would cook. And they were really dangerous because if they got kicked over, they could explode. You're trusting the meth cook to burp them, they'd call it, at the right time, where you'd unscrew it and off-gas it, and then put it back on, and they would have to wear respirators and stuff when they off-gas it because of all the chemical odor and stuff that would come off. So in order to off-gas it, they'd have to wear respirators and stuff, but if they didn't off-gas it, it would explode. But if they off-gassed it too quickly and exposed it to the right atmosphere with the lithium batteries and stuff, it could also cause a flash fire to occur. Like they were super, super dangerous. I'm really happy that those were short-lived and are no longer a thing, because you had basically car bombs driving around the city of Eau Claire because people would put them in cars and stuff.
so was that something?
Could have been something
Could have
like
been
that.
something like
Yeah,
that? I mean,
certainly
it's-
could have been somebody off-gassing a one pot.
There was no reason for
Yeah.
that to be that, it was crazy.
Yeah, it certainly could have
Was
been.
that something, and we did, I just told the seller, or the owner of the property,
Yeah.
I mean, there's something going on.
Yeah,
right? And
if you
it's
guys
all-
see something like that,
Okay.
you can take my number down. That's my cell phone number. If you want to be anonymous, whatever it could be, is just hey, I saw this. It just didn't seem right, and I want to just let somebody know about it. Oh, I look into that stuff all the time.
Yeah, and that's the thing, from us, we go into
Yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of properties.
Yep.
Yeah, we do, I mean, this stuff is just graduated to unbelievable.
Yeah.
And, our whole life has been on a long time. This is crazy. So if we are to see something like that, who do we?
If you see it in this,
Are we obligated? I mean.
I don't think you're obligated.
Well, not obligated, but I mean.
Yeah.
Because we're authorized to be at the property.
Yep.
So that's the thing. How do you?
No, if